أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين سيدنا وسيد الأولين والآخرين بالقاسم محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المنتجبين المنتخبين المظلومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. We see tonight we're here gathered to commemorate the istishhad of Awwal al-Sibtain and Sayyid Shabab Ahl al-Jannah al-Imam al-Hassan al-Mujtaba alayhi salam Allah. The first mawlud to that holy union between Fatima alayhi salam Allah and Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam sallu ala nabi. So I wanted to spend, we've got just under an hour talking about the different stages in the life of Imam Hassan alayhi salam Allah and some of the lessons that we can take. I say this every time I speak about Imam Hassan alayhi salam Allah. Imam Hassan is known as the Imam al-Mazlum. And he's not Mazlum just by the enemies of Ahlul Bayt. No, he's Mazlum by the enemies and the friends alike. As in we, the Shias, have neglected this Imam. Sometimes we talk as if Ali and Fatima only had one son, Imam Hussain alayhi salam Allah, forgetting that there's also Imam Hassan Mujtaba alayhi salam. Very little is discussed about him in our circles. Very little is mentioned of him in our circles. When we hold Majlis-e-Azah for Imam Hussain alayhi salam, for Amir al-Mu'mineen, for Fatima Zahra, we hold 3 to 10 nights. But for Imam Hassan Mujtaba alayhi salam Allah, generally we just hold that one night. So really and truly he is an Imam who is Mazlum on both sides of the field. And I think that we, the Shias, the more we can learn from this Imam, the more we can understand Karbala better. And the better that we can understand Karbala, the better we can understand our current Imam Ajalallah Ta'ala Farajahu Sharif Sallallahu Alaihi Muhammadin wa Ali Muhammad. Just some facts for the youth who don't know much about Imam Hassan Mujtaba alayhi salam Allah. He passed away at the age of 47. Imam Hussain passed away at the age of 57. So there's a 10-year difference. Imam Hussain alayhi salam Allah outlived Imam Hassan by 10 years. Between Imam Hassan and Imam Hussain alayhi salam Allah, there's a 2-year gap at the very most. Narrations put that there's a 2-year difference between the two Imams alayhi salam Allah. Imam Hassan's imamat, the period of his imamah, lasted for 10 years. So 10 years after Imam Ali alayhi salam Allah left the dunya until Imam Hassan's shahada is a period of 10 years. The period of Imam Hussein's imamat is 11 years. Now, some figures put it just under 11, but there is not much difference between the two imams. Now, why do I mention the similarities between the two imams? Because Rasulullah has said that both their mission is one and the same. Al-Hasan wal-Hussein imama qama aw qa'ada. Imam Hassan and Hussein are the imams, whether they rise against the tyrant or whether they decide to sit. And by what we mean here by sit is the peace treaty of Imam Hassan alayhi salam Allah. Generally what the people thought, especially in that time of Arabia, as opposed to today's opinions. Today, we know much of our imams. My father always said we should thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we were not born in the time of Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam Allah. Because if we were born in his time, we'd probably be his enemies. And the reason why we'd be his enemies is because the propaganda at the time. Today we know Ali ibn Abi Talib better than we would have known him if we was living in his time. Because the system put in place by Muawiyah and the likes criminalized Amir al-Mu'mineen, criminalized Ahlul Bayt, made them look like the Khawarij, made them look like the rebels, and made the children of Bani Umayyah seem like they were the Imams. So chances are we would have opposed the Imams, unless of course Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have been kind to us and saved us from going against our Imams. So therefore, we know a lot about the Imams today that we wouldn't have known in that time. One of the things that we can know today is, had it not been for Imam Hussain alayhi salamullah, Karbala would have not been successful. There is a book called Sulh al-Hasan, the peace treaty of Imam Hussain alayhi salamullah. That's a book that I would highly recommend each and every individual in this room to read it. If that is all you can do for your Imam, Imam Hussain alayhi salamullah, by way of remembering him and by way of honoring him and by way of showing due respect to Fatima and Imam Ali alayhim salamullah and to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, then I recommend you do that. Sulh al-Hasan, the peace treaty of Imam Hussain alayhi salamullah. That book, in it you will find so much on why Imam Hussain entered a peace treaty, which we will give you the highlights of tonight inshallah. But nevertheless, the onus and the responsibility is upon you to go and learn about your Imam, because Usul al-Din is not something that we can learn from somebody else. As in Marja'iyya, I go to them for Furu' al-Din, I don't go for Usul al-Din. I don't ask my Marja'iyya to prove to me Allah's existence. My Marja'iyya will teach me how to do wudu, how to do salah, what makes my salah wajib, what makes my salah batil. But Marja'iyya, it's not wajib on him to educate me on how to prove Allah's oneness. Neither is it wajib on him to prove to me the nubuwwah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Sallu ala nabi. These are things which we have to put time and effort into. The way Allah works. Because He doesn't want you to shoulder everything on somebody else. He wants you to put in some effort. Part of the things which we have to put effort in is to understand, to find proof and to find certainty in Allah's existence. Number one. Number two, we have to believe in Allah's adala. We have to find that ourselves. Nubuwwah, we must also come to a conclusion ourselves based on research. And Imamah also falls under that same category. That we have to go and do research until we are absolutely certain Imam Ali is the Imam. Imam Hassan is the Imam. Abu Abdullah al-Hussain is an Imam. All the way from Khatam to Qa'im. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam ajma'in. Sallu ala nabi. It is our responsibility as individuals that we have to go and research and find out as much as we can about our Imams. Because one of the traditions that we have, when you are placed in the grave and you are asked, who is your Lord? It's not your lips that speak. Your lips are unable to speak. It's not what you've memorized. No, it's the yaqeen. It's the certainty that Allah is Allah. That's what will speak. When you are asked who is your prophet, you have to have yaqeen, absolute proof and absolute certainty who your prophet is. Now we, the school of Ahlul Bayt, believe that we will be asked about 12 Imams. Now 100% we will all get the first and the third Imam, we'll all get them. Yaqeen. We all know who Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salamullah. We can talk about him from now until the day of judgment and we wouldn't have said enough. We can talk about Imam Hussain alayhi salamullah. We wouldn't have said enough. But if someone was to ask us about Imam Hassan alayhi salamullah, including myself, I'll probably give you 3 lectures on that subject. Because we don't know enough. So now I'm supposed to answer for 12 Imams. I'm supposed to say yaqeen, I have proof, and certainty that these 12 are my Imams. But in essence, can we really say we know much about Imam Hassan alayhi salamullah? I remember Sayyid Aman Akshawani once, he said, who attended the majlis for the istishhad of Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba alayhi salamullah. Now we've got different narrations. So today is being one of the nights, and one comes about 10 days after the Arba'in of Abu Abdullah al-Hussain alayhi salamullah, being coinciding with Wafat Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So Sayyid Ammar was asking a group of youth, we was all sitting down, and he said, who attended the majlis for Wafat of Imam Hassan alayhi salamullah? And everybody was like, looking a bit ashamed. We didn't go. He said, okay, and which one of you attended the istishhad of Rasulullah? So we said, yeah, we did. He said, okay, then you should know that the two coincide on the same time. But it shows you that we did not know. I mean, we didn't know. And partly it shows that when we went to Majlis, we wasn't even listening. Because if we were listening, then we would have known, right? But we didn't know. Now, that is something very important for us to think about. Because come the day you are placed in your grave, you know, we all like to think about Akhirah and the signs of Qiyamah. Imam Ali puts it beautifully. He says, the signs of Qiyamah is the moment you're lowered in your grave. That's your Qiyamah. It's begun, right? So let's not think too far ahead in life. Let's think about ourselves first. Let's be a bit selfish just for that one moment in our life when we're buried in our grave. Let's think about how we can benefit ourselves then. When we are asked about our 12 Imams, we can't answer if we don't know who they are, if we haven't taken time and effort to try and understand them. Especially the second Imam and the first Mawlud to Ahlul Bayt alayhim salamullah. We don't know much about him. So today, inshallah, or rather tonight, we will take some time to discuss a bit more about him. The only reason I gave this lengthy introduction is because there is not enough time for me to say what I have to say about Imam Hussain alayhi salamullah. So I'm leaving it. Part of me is to get you interested in the subject, and the part of you is to go and research and read that book, Sulh al-Hasan alayhi salamullah. You can find it both on the internet, and I'm sure you probably have it here in the library. Sallu ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. A few things about Imam Hussain alayhi salamullah. I want to talk about the peace treaty. One of the things that is often overlooked, you know, when people come up to us and they question us, they say, well, why did Imam Hussain go to war? Or rather, not go to war, but why did he, you know, leave his hometown to oppose Yazid's way? Whereas his Imam Hussain alayhi salamullah had a peace treaty. A couple of things to keep in mind, and I already mentioned this now. Imam Hassan's imamah was 10 years. Imam Hussain was 11 years. 10 years Imam Hussain alayhi salamullah had a peace treaty with Muawiyah. If Imam Hussain was any different, Imam Hussain would have went against Muawiyah immediately, but Imam Hussain remained 10 years under Muawiyah as well. And he honored the peace treaty of Imam Hassan. Only in the 11th year did the troubles begin to escalate in the life of Imam Hussain, because Yazid La'natullah alayhi was only the political leader for a year in his time. That means Muawiyah, Imam Hussain lived under him for 10 years. He didn't do one thing different to what Imam Hassan alayhi salamullah did in 10 years. He honored the promise of his brother, which means he saw they were both in the same mission. Which means if Imam Hassan lived for another 11 years, Imam Hassan would have rose against Yazid. Exactly the same. Nothing would have changed. So let's not confuse ourselves. Some of us, including myself growing up, would have thought that Imam Hassan alayhi salamullah lived under Muawiyah. The day Imam Hassan was poisoned, Muawiyah died, Yazid came into power, Imam Hussain immediately rose. No, Imam Hussein's imamah lasted 11 years, 10 of which was under the rule of Muawiyah la'natullahi alayhi. Why did Imam Hassan and Imam Hussain alayhi salamullah settle for the peace treaty? We have to look at what happened before and what will happen after, right? What happened before is that Imam Ali alayhi salamullah, the moment he ascended the seat of Khilafah, immediately civil wars began to break out against him. The first of which being Talha and Zubair and Aisha in the Battle of Jamal, right? A battle in which a matter of hours passed and 10,000 companions of Rasulullah were killed from both sides of the camp. Immediately after the Battle of Jamal, we have the Battle of Siffin, where Muawiyah, with a very strong army from Syria, come and bring trouble to the door of Imam Ali alayhi salamullah. So now there is a split between the Muslim world. There is Asham, who have given allegiance to Muawiyah, and there is Iraq and Hijaz, who have given their allegiance to Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salamullah. But Iraq also broke off during the Battle of Jamal. So part of Iraq now was their loyalty began to kind of incline towards Talha and Zubair, and after they left, they sided with neither Muawiyah nor Ali. They became the Khawarij, right? So we had the seceders. So Imam Ali alayhi salamullah his supporters are between an immediate battle in Basra, followed by an immediate battle in Siffin, followed by an immediate battle in Nahrawain, which is with the Khawarij. So the moment Imam Ali alayhi salamullah closes his eyes and he leaves this world, Imam Hassan alayhi salamullah inherits a nation that is exhausted from war. People don't want to go to war anymore. People have lost loved ones. People have lost the resolve to continue to fight. People want to get back to making a living. They don't want to go to war again. And Imam Hassan alayhi salamullah was aware of this fact. And he was aware that the very same people who had betrayed his father will soon betray him. So number one. Number two, Imam Ali alayhi salamullah, when he became the Khalifa, he moved from Medina to Kufa. Now Kufa was, it came under the Islamic rule around about the 7th year of Hijrah. But in that time, Kufa was like a very remote and isolated town. And it wasn't really something to be spoken of. But Imam Ali alayhi salamullah, the reason why he moved from Medina to Kufa is Medina's resources were very limited. And anybody who knows anything about government and how to rule, you understand that your main capital city cannot be dependent on other cities, but rather other cities must be dependent on the capital. Because if the capital city is now to be laid on siege, then your resources will run out. Medina was depending, because of its large population and its limited resources, it was depending on other cities. Whereas Kufa didn't have that problem. Kufa was thriving, being that it wasn't overpopulated and being of its location, it was thriving and it didn't depend on anybody. It was an independent state. More to the point, Kufa was closer to the war front where the battles were taking place. As in, if we're looking Medina to Basra and Kufa to Basra, Kufa is obviously closer. If we're looking Medina to Syria and Kufa to Syria, Kufa is closer. If we're looking Medina to Iran and Kufa to Iran, Medina will be closer. Kufa will be closer. So strategically, economically and financially, it made more sense to make Kufa the capital. Number one. Number two, there was a lot of rebellion happening in Iraq, as in the army of Basra was in Iraq. So Imam needed to be there, number one, to kind of put a deterrent so that the people of Iraq will not continue to rise against him. And at the same time, the people of Iraq can now get to know Ahlul Bayt a bit more. And there you find that loyalty began to spring from amongst them, right? But Kufa now, that it's the city of Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salamullah, once it becomes the capital of Islam, all the trading begins to take place there. And since the trading begins to take place there, you find that you had people from Iran settling there. You had people from Hijaz settling there. You had people from Yemen settling there. You had people from the Indo-Pak region. Wherever people were trading and they had something to sell, they came to Kufa, the capital of the Muslim world. And now that they are there, the army of Imam is also there. And obviously, when you've got an army of 30,000 people need to be fed. They need to be housed. They need to be entertained. So it meant more and more business people began to come to Kufa. Which means now not everybody in Kufa was actually a lover of Ahlul Bayt or a Shia of Ahlul Bayt or even a Muslim to that end. But they were simply there for business and commerce reasons. They were there because their interest was in Kufa. These people were affected by the policy of the state. And that policy of Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salamullah did not favor backhand deals and a black market. So most of them wanted to see the end of Imam Ali alayhi salamullah and wanted to support through their money and through their wealth another governor who will help them increase their business and increase their monopoly. So therefore there was an opposition to Ahlul Bayt alayhim salamullah from the traders and the merchants. Right? And Kufa was a whole jumbled up place where there were many different people with loyalties, one day going this way, one day going that way. Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salamullah tried the best that he could to unite these people under the banner of Islam, returning to the principles of Islam, but the people refused. And only the select and the elite of those people who had pure faith were supporters of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salamullah. So now Imam Ali alayhi salamullah leaves this world, assassinated in the mosque by one of the people who at one point was in the army of the Imam. Al-La'in ibn Muljim alayhi la'natullah. The moment he assassinates Imam Ali alayhi salamullah, Imam Hassan now becomes the Khalifa. He's always been the Imam, but he becomes the Khalifa. And Imam Hassan and Imam Ali are the only two personalities in the history of Islam who received an absolute unanimous vote from the people. If we look at the way the other Khalifas were elected, we will find that either it was done within a closed circle, by nomination of letter, by a certain elect community, or by one person passing it down to his son, like Yazid and Muawiyah and the likes afterwards, Bani Umayyah and Bani Abbas. But the only two individuals to receive a unanimous vote of the whole Muslim world at the time were Imam Ali alayhi salamullah and Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba alayhi salam. But now Imam Hassan is facing the same political differences that his father faced. And he understood that going to war will not solve anything. And rising against Muawiyah will not be beneficial to the Muslims, but rather beneficial to those who want to see the end of Islam. So therefore, Imam Hassan alayhi salamullah, when the people came to render him support, he told them, don't think that I believe in your loyalty. You are the same people who betrayed my father just yesterday. I mean, the Khawarij, you killed my father. You were called Khawarij because you exited from, after giving bay'ah to my father, you exited from the oath of bay'ah. You abandoned the bay'ah. So, do you think that I am fooled by your words? No, I'm not fooled by your words. And I know that you will betray me. I know that the moment we go out, you will betray me. And Imam Hassan alayhi salamullah was betrayed by the same people to such an extent that one of his guards came and stabbed him in the leg with a poison blade, salamullahi alayhi. And Imam Hassan alayhi salamullah, they attacked him in his tent where he had, in those days, you would have the main tent in the middle. And that tent, that's where all the commanders come to meet and strategies planned out and everything else. They attacked Imam Hassan alayhi salamullah in his tent and they stole the musalla from beneath him while he was in salah. So now Imam Hassan alayhi salamullah, what other alternative does he have but to make a peace treaty? And even the peace treaty was enforced on Imam Hassan alayhi salamullah. Muawiyah la'natullah alayhi, he knew very well the disloyalty amongst the ranks of Imam Hassan's army. And he knew because he was the one that was paying the people. He was paying them in tens and thousands of dirhams. Every time Imam Hassan would send a messenger to him, he would bribe that messenger and that messenger will turn against Imam Hassan. Every time Imam Hassan, I think on 3 different occasions, Imam Hassan places a commander in the army, Muawiyah buys that commander out and he buys half the army with him. Because you see, the difference is, Imam Hassan alayhi salamullah, he did not play about with the wealth of the people. The taxes that people were paying, Imam Hassan didn't use it to win his war by propaganda. Whereas Muawiyah didn't care. Muawiyah wasn't taking his own pocket money and paying these people. He was taking the taxes and he was sharing them amongst whoever he wants, wherever he can buy loyalty. They say Muawiyah had 2 weapons. Honey that's poisoned, and wealth of the mu'mineen. That's how he used to buy people or kill people, right? So, Imam Hassan's army is now divided and Muawiyah knows this. Muawiyah plays a very tactical game and he brings his whole army to the borders of Imam Hassan's city. And he says to Imam Hassan, why should we exhaust the Muslimin? Let us make a peace treaty. Me and you. You see, he's very conniving because Imam Ali made him that offer before and he refused. Imam Ali, in one of his letters in Nahj al-Balagha, he writes to Muawiyah. He says, "Oh Muawiyah, Why should we exhaust the Muslimin into a war that's not going to benefit them? And all we're doing is we are weakening the Muslim world. I am still the same Ali ibn Abi Talib. The same blood that ran through my veins in the Battle of Badr runs through my veins today. And the same Dhul Fiqar is in my hand. And the same courage that I defended Islam then remains in me today. I am no coward. So why don't me and you, Muawiyah, meet one-to-one, man-to-man? And let us settle this amongst ourselves. Muawiyah, obviously, he's not a brave man like Ali ibn Abi Talib. So he opts out of that option. But now he wants to look like the good guy. He comes to Imam Hassan offering him that which Ali ibn Abi Talib had offered Muawiyah in the first place. Only difference is he knows he can't offer Imam Hassan a one-to-one battle because he will lose. So he offers Imam Hassan peace. And he says to Imam Hassan, let's make a peace treaty. Because he knows if Imam Hassan now refuses the peace treaty, Muawiyah for the rest of the history will be remembered as the man of peace, and Imam Hassan will be remembered as the warmonger. That Imam Hassan did not want to make peace. Imam Hassan was a violent man. Imam Hassan was a bloodthirsty individual. So Muawiyah is very conniving and very deceiving. And he puts Imam Hassan in a situation where he either has to concede to peace or he has to declare war when peace treaties are being made. So Imam Hassan alayhi salamullah says, there is no problem. My grandfather, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam, entered the peace treaty of Hudaybiyah. So I am going to enter a peace treaty with you. But I'll tell you one thing, Muawiyah. I know that you will not honor this peace treaty and you will tear it up before the ink dries. So now Imam Hassan capitalizes on this opportunity because there's two things here that are at play. There's personal ethics and there's professional ethics. And Muawiyah, in Arabic we say, يلعب الحبلين, right? He's playing on two ropes. He pulls one string from here when it benefits him, he pulls one string from there when it benefits him. Muawiyah la'natullah alayh was playing his private ethics, his personal ethics were always behind closed doors. Muawiyah would never drink in public. Muawiyah would not slander in public. Muawiyah in public was the most pious of individuals. He would pretend to be muttaqi, mu'min in public. But behind closed doors, he was a corrupt individual. Now, the whole world at the time was confused. They could not differentiate between Ali ibn Abi Talib and they could not differentiate between Muawiyah. I'll give you two examples of that. Sallallahu ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. The people who had just entered the fold of Islam, they go to Abu Hurairah and they say, Abu Hurairah, you are a companion of Rasulullah. We are confused. Ali looks good and Muawiyah looks good. So who do we follow? Because the two are going at war right now. So Abu Hurairah says to them, food on the table of Muawiyah is good and salah behind Ali is good. So it depends, which one do you want? Right? If you want your salah to be accepted, don't pray behind Muawiyah, pray behind Ali. And if you want to satisfy your stomach, don't eat with Ali because Ali eats like the poor. Go eat with Muawiyah because he eats like kings. Another incident that took place, and this really highlights the level of ignorance that the people had been kept under. And if you want to understand how did that happen, don't look beyond today. Right now, look how confused the world is with regards to Islam. Right? Media and different forms of propaganda, it's the same thing. History is just repeating itself. The same way that Muslims are being called terrorists, and we are told that Muslims, they kill the women and la la la. If you look in India, believe me, Hindus, Sikhs, Muslims all do it. It's a cultural thing, it's not an Islamic thing. But nobody speaks about the Hindus and the Sikhs, how they have honor killings. But everybody talks about the Muslims having honor killings. Right? You want to talk about Iraq and they say, oh, the Muslims in Iraq. Excuse me, there's Jews and Christians in Iraq. And talk about Iran, the Muslims, the largest Jewish community in the world is in Iran. That's a fact. the largest Jewish community in the world. Larger than Israel, larger than New York. And you know what? They live the most peaceful life. And they will not leave Iran. 8-year war between Saddam and Ayatollah Khomeini, Iraq and Iran war, and the Jews did not leave because they knew they will never have it as good as they will under the Islamic State, right? But these are things that are not said on the news. So propaganda can really work its magic on the people. And the same way that the people are confused about Islam today, they were confused about Ahlul Bayt in those days. Now, in that time, something happened. An individual comes. Now, in Arabic terminology, a camel, you don't just say camel like this. There's naga and there's jamal. One means female camel and one means male camel. One of the companions of Imam Ali alayhi salam Allah happens to be trading and he goes to Damascus. When he goes to Damascus, one of Muawiyah's people has lost his female camel. So he comes to the companion of Imam Ali and he says, that's my female camel. The companion says, I'm sure if you take a closer look, it's a male camel. It's not a female. He says, no, that's my female camel. He says, it's a male. He says, it's a female. And if you don't give her back to me, I will take you to Muawiyah and there your head will come off. He said, okay, fine, let's go to Muawiyah. You know, since the people are ignorant, at least the Khalifa will be clever. He comes and he stands before the Khalifa and Muawiyah turns around and he says, give him the female camel. He says, but I think being the Khalifa, you would have been more smarter. It's a male. Take a closer look. He says, no, give him the female camel and I will compensate you. Don't worry. Let's just get the day rolling. He says, okay. So the guy gives him the camel. He says, by Allah, it's a male. But take it anyway. It's not my problem now. Muawiyah turns around, compensates this guy. Then he says to him, when you go back to Ali ibn Abi Talib, or rather he says Abu Turab, he says, I want you to tell him something. He said, okay, what should I tell him? He said, tell him Muawiyah is fighting you with an army that cannot differentiate between a male camel and a female camel. How will they then distinguish between Ali and Muawiyah? As in, I've kept the people so ignorant that linguistically they don't know the difference between Jamal and Naqa. Linguistically, they don't know the difference. You know? If we look at certain societies today, the way they speak is different to the way that we speak in mainstream. You know, the linguistics of the community, and then we say, yo, you know, it's thuggish, ruggish behavior. But they're kept ignorant because they don't want them to think outside the box. Right? The same thing was happening in the time of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam Allah. So now Imam Hussain alayhi salam Allah has inherited this world of problems. And the people cannot tell the difference between Ali and Muawiyah. Because Muawiyah would pretend that he's good outside, but behind closed doors he was evil. So Imam Hussain alayhi salam Allah, his peace treaty was a means to salvage what was remaining of the Shia Muslims, and number two, to expose Muawiyah in his ways. Because Muawiyah was only pretending to be good until he secured the seat of Khilafah. And Imam Hussain knew this very well. Because the moment Muawiyah takes this peace treaty and Imam Hussain signs it, Imam Hussain puts conditions. And he knows that they are conditions which Muawiyah can never abide by. And he says to Muawiyah, the only way we're going to have a peace treaty is if you abide by these conditions. That's my conditions for peace. Muawiyah says, fine, put whatever you want. Here's a blank piece of paper. Imam Hussain says, immediately you must cease the cursing of Ali ibn Abi Talib on the minbar. You have to stop this. You must stop mistreating those who love us, the Shia and the Muhibbeen. You must pay them, you must backdate their payments from Mal al-Mu'mineen, the welfare system. The Shias of Ahlul Bayt were not allowed to work, neither were they allowed to collect any money from Mal al-Mu'mineen. The first one to die of poverty was Abu Dharr al-Ghifari. He was denied his rights. So the Shia were being denied their rights. Imam alayhi salam Allah says, I want you to give them back their rights. And I want you to stop harassing them. Muawiyah says, okay. Anything else? Imam puts some more conditions. And then Imam puts a very important condition. He says, upon your death or upon my death, the Khalifa after you will not be your son. the Khalifa will be myself, but if I have passed away, it will be my brother Imam Hussain alayhi salam. Allah sallu ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Now that shows you something, but keep that in mind, we'll come back to it. Imam Hassan alayhi salam says, the only way I will go into peace with you is if Yazid does not become the Khalifa. Which means if Imam Hassan alayhi salam stayed alive after Muawiyah had passed away and Yazid became the Khalifa, Imam Hassan would have rose against him. Because part of the condition is that Yazid will not be the Khalifa, because Imam knows how much of a wretched and vile person is Yazid. Now Imam makes this peace treaty to expose Muawiyah lanatullahi alayhi. The moment Muawiyah gets the paper back from Imam Hassan and it's signed, he goes and he addresses the people. And when he addresses the people, he tells them, this is an agreement between me and your sheikh, meaning your leader. He has required of me certain conditions, but I shall not fulfill them. Then he tears up the paper and he places it under his foot. And he says, these are the words of your sheikh, they are beneath my feet. I did not come to you today to rule over you so that I call you towards salah, or to teach you zakat, or to teach you hajj, or to teach you jihad, for these are things that you already know. I only came to rule over you because I am power hungry. I like to rule over the people. Now it's too late. Muawiyah has gotten everything he needs. It's too late for anyone to rise against him now. He has secured the deal. He is now not just in charge of Sham, but he's in charge of the whole Muslim world. Which means he has become the undisputed Khalifa. And therefore Imam Hassan alayhi salamullah, immediately the moment he signed the peace treaty, he achieved his objective. That he exposed Muawiyah, because now Muawiyah doesn't need to be afraid of anyone. So now the true face of Muawiyah comes out. And we begin to see that the following 20 years of his rule, he begins to assassinate freely, and he becomes drunk on the minbar, and he does all sorts of things. And he begins to expose himself more and more. And Imam Hassan alayhi salamullah did that. This peace treaty of Imam Hassan is so instrumental to the success of Karbala, because had Imam Hassan alayhi salamullah not exposed Bani Umayyah's true identity, then the people would have not supported Imam Hussain. Remember, Imam Hassan did not have 72 companions. And he said, Salamullah alayhi, if I had 72 companions, I would rise against Muawiyah. But he didn't have that. He had at the very best 15 outside of Ahlul Bayt. So here, Imam Hussain alayhi salamullah, at least he managed to get 72, because Imam Hassan alayhi salamullah exposed Muawiyah. And the people got to live 20 years under Bani Umayyah. Because of the peace treaty of Imam Hassan, Bani Umayyah were now no longer playing secret games. They were playing out in the open. Their agenda came out to the forefront. And the people began to see that, you know what, we don't want to live under another Bani Umayyah. So the moment Muawiyah dies, the people don't even wait to see how Yazid is going to rule. The moment he dies, they write to Imam Hussain alayhi salamullah, the tyrant has gone, so hasten towards us, for we are not ready to live under his son. And that is just one, I guess, paragraph in the life of Imam Hassan alayhi salamullah that we can learn. That just from one incident in the life of Imam Hassan, if we just look at the peace treaty, we haven't even looked at the conditions, we haven't dissected the conditions and why and so on and so forth, but we're just talking about Imam Hassan's peace treaty and the environment under which he lived. So I strongly recommend that we go and we read about Imam Hassan alayhi salamullah, because then we begin to honor him more, we begin to respect him more, we begin to appreciate him more, we begin to understand him more and to love him more, because love only comes from understanding. And Allah has commanded us that we love Ahlul Bayt alayhim salamullah. And if we are to obey the commandment of Allah, we should love Imam Hussain before Imam Hussain, because he was born first. Obviously not that there's a difference between the Imams, but we're supposed to love all the Imams, and therefore we should love Imam Hussain before loving Imam Hussain. The same way that we love Ali ibn Abi Talib before we love the other Imams. So we need to give our Imams their rights. And inshallah, over the next coming nights, you'd spend, even if it's 15 minutes, just reading on Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba alayhi salam. Allah sallu ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Our time is concluded, and inshallah we will turn our hearts and minds to Medina. If you just dim out the lights, where we can recite to you some of the masa'ib that Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba alayhi salam Allah had to witness, and some of the troubles that he had to go through, and how much this grieved Abu Abdullah al-Hussain alayhi salam. Allah sallu ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. When Muawiyah la'natullah alayhi, in these 10 years, Imam Hassan, don't think that he signed a peace treaty and he remained silent. No. If he remained silent, there would have been no need for Muawiyah to kill him. But Imam Hassan alayhi salam Allah continued his generosity towards the people, continued to open his home to the people, continued to educate the people. And Muawiyah la'natullah alayhi saw that no matter what he did, he could not get the love of the people. And since the people's hearts were inclined towards Imam Hassan alayhi salam Allah, he knew that if Imam Hassan remained alive after Muawiyah died, then surely the Khilafah will never go to Yazid, it will go to Imam Hassan alayhi salam Allah. And he wanted to get rid of that threat. So then he began to plot against Imam Hassan alayhi salam Allah. Some of the generosity of Imam Hassan. A person comes to Medina and he says, point me towards the most generous of the people, because I am in great debt. So they said to him, the most generous? He said, yes. They said, look no further than the house of Hassan al-Mujtaba alayhi salam. Innahu karimu ahlul bayt. He is not just the most generous in Medina. He is the most generous of the most generous household. Ahlul Bayt were known as the generous. Innahu karimu ahlul bayt. He is the generous of Ahlul Bayt. So this person comes to Imam Hassan alayhi salam Allah. He says, Imam, I am in need. Before he finished his sentence, Imam Hassan takes all that he has and he gives it to him. He says, Imam, will you not at least let me tell you what I need first? Or at least let me say some poem in your praise. You know, as the custom of the Arabs, you say some poetry in front of a king, and the king will reward you depending on how good your poem is. You know, basically, you're just talking nonsense to the guy and making him feel good about himself, and he pays you for that. So you're deceiving yourself and you're deceiving him. That's what it comes down to, in essence. Imam Hassan alayhi salam Allah says, you don't need to do any of that with me. He says, why? He says, because I come from a household that we are fearful of Allah. When a person extends his hand, he should lose his face. You know, whenever you put your hand out to somebody and you say, give me, you lose face in front of that person. Imam Hassan alayhi salam Allah says, I don't want you to ask me because I'm afraid of Allah that you might feel hurt inside, so I'll give you anyway. And leave your praise for those who are in need of it. We are not in need of this poetry and the rest of it. That's what you call generosity. To give before the person even asks of you. Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam Allah, such as Imam Hassan. So when Imam Hassan has this kind of custom with the people, and the people have this kind of love towards him, of course Muawiyah will feel threatened. And of course he will feel that he needs to get rid of this Imam. But even when it came to killing Imam Hassan, he could not kill him without his generosity. because it was the generosity of Imam Hassan alayhi salamullah that when he calculated the whole situation, he knew that his life will safeguard the religion of Islam. He knew that if he did not drink that poison, then Yazid Muawiyah lanatullah alayhi would call Imam Hassan to a war, the result of which the people will be killed. So Imam Hassan, being the generous of Ahlul Bayt, gave his life and drank that poison, knowing that that was the best, not for him, but for the nation of Rasulullah. That him dying by poison is the surest way of averting another war and saving the blood of the Shia of Ahlul Bayt. Muawiyah la'natullah alayh comes to Ju'da. Ju'da, this woman was a vile woman. She comes from the most wretched house in Muslim history. Her father was one of the people. There were 3 people who planned the assassination of Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salamullah. Her father was one of them. She was the killer of Imam Hassan alayhi salam, and her brother was one of the first to trample the body of Imam Hussain beneath the hoofs of horses. A most vile and wretched family. One of the first to oppose Ahlul Bayt alayhim salamullah. Ju'da, Muawiyah says to her, if you poison your husband Imam Hassan, then I will give you my son Yazid in marriage and you will be the queen of the Muslim world. And she is taken by her desires and by this greed. So he gives her the most powerful concussion of poison, that it was brewing for more than a month. And he says to her, I want you to put this in the drink of Imam Hassan. When you give him the milk, I want you to put this poison in there. She came to Imam Hassan alayhi salamullah. Imam Hassan had been fasting that day. When it was time for him to open his fast, she gives him this drink. He takes it. He takes one sip, then he gives it back to her. She says, drink some more. He says, I have drank enough to satisfy you and your master. As in, he knows that the poison is there. The moment he drank it, he began to feel the effect of the pains and the poison. He says to her, now take your belongings and leave me. From today onwards, there is no halal between me and you. So she leaves Imam Hassan alayhi salam. They say that at that moment, Imam Hassan alayhi salam begins to cough and that his skin begins to turn so pale it looked yellow. This is the son of Fatima al-Zahra. This is the son of Amir al-Mu'mineen. This is Sayyid Shababi Ahl al-Jannah, Awwal al-Sibtain. While he is in this state, the poison really begins to take effect on him. He begins to cough, but Imam, because he was fasting all day, his stomach was empty, so when the poison went in, it immediately began to cut the liver of Imam Hassan alayhi salam, until Imam Hassan was coughing out so intense that a piece of meat from the liver of Hassan al-Mujtaba, he coughed it out and it was in the plate before him. When Aba Abdullah al-Hussain came into the room of Imam Hassan, he sees there sitting the Shabih of Rasulullah with a stick in his hand, moving this thing on the plate. When Imam Hussain looked closer, it was the liver of Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba. Imam Hussain begins to cry. He says, Akhi ibn al-Fatimatu Zahra, what has become of you? Imam Hassan alayhi salam, Allah says to him, Ya Aba Abdullah, quickly I want you to remove this plate from here. He says to him, why? He says, I can hear the footsteps of Zainab approaching, and I do not want the daughter of our mother to be heartbroken when she sees my liver like this. Before Imam Hussain alayhi salam, Allah could remove the liver, Zainab comes into the room and she looks. Immediately she loses control and she falls to the floor. She calls out, Wa Muhammada, Wa Fatima, Wa Amir al-Mu'mineen, where are you to come and see the state of Hassan al-Mujtaba alayhi salam? Immediately they remove this plate from Zainab alayhi salam. Imam Hassan begins to consolidate her. Imam Hassan alayhi salam, as he is passing away from the dunya, he says to Imam Hussain alayhi salam, Ya Aba Abdullah, when you will take me to bury me, I want you to bury me next to my grandfather Rasulullah, for I love him dearly. But Ya Aba Abdullah, when you take me to bury me, this woman will stop you from burying me there. Aba Abdullah, they will decorate my body with arrows, but do not fight them. Instead, bury me in Jannatul Baqi', next to my uncle Hamza, next to our grandfather Hamza alayhi salam. Imam Hussain alayhi salam Allah is listening to the will of Imam Hassan, such a peaceful person that he doesn't want any harm to come to the community after him. When Imam Hassan alayhi salam Allah is about to close his eyes, his head is in the lap of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. They say Imam Hussein was crying red tears for Imam Hassan alayhi salam. The eyes of Abu Abdullah were wounded. Imam Hassan said to him, Ya Abu Abdullah, la yawmuka yawmuka ya Abu Abdullah. No day is like your day, Ya Abu Abdullah. Despite the pain of Imam Hassan, he is still thinking about Karbala of Hussein. Imam Hassan alayhi salam Allah becomes shaheed. Imam Hussein takes the janazah as they come towards Rasulullah, as they come to the grave of Rasulullah. That lady comes in the way with a group of so-called Muslims. She says, no, by Allah, you denied Uthman to be buried next to the Prophet. I will not have the son of Amir al-Mu'mineen buried next to the Prophet. As they are talking, she tells them, let loose the arrows. More than 70 arrows were implanted in the body of Imam Hassan. Imam Hussein alayhi salam holds back Abu Fadl al-Abbas. He says, Ya Abbas, Imam Hassan did not want us to fight. Mu'mineen and mu'minat. Imagine Zainab alayhi salam. How difficult was it for her to say farewell to Imam Hassan? How difficult was it for her to say farewell the first time? But now they have to return the janazah of Imam Hassan with 70 arrows in there, and she has to sit and watch as Imam Hussein with his hand removes these arrows one by one from the body of Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba alayhi salam. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا آل محمد أي منقلب سينقلبون. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين. Ilahi, we beseech you by Sayyid Shabab Ahl al-Jannah, by the first of the Sibtain, by the first Mawlud to the Itra Tahira, forgive us our sins. Unite us with Ahlul Bayt alayhim salamullah in the Akhirah as you have made them known to us in the dunya. Ilahi, we beseech you by the right of Fatima to Zahra alayhi salamullah, show us a day when we can visit the shrine of our Imam Hassan alayhi salamullah in Jannatul Baqi', where we will see a dome on the graves of our Imams in the Jannatul Baqi'. Ilahi, especially our Shia brothers and sisters in Saudi Arabia, who are just as oppressed as our Imams in Saudi Arabia. Ilahi, remove the